Okay, my next guest saw his county suffer some of the worst flooding damage in the state. More than 50,000 residents in Ulster County lost power, and at least 200 people were evacuated from their homes. Mike Hein is the Ulster County Executive. He's joining me in the studio. County Exec, it's good to see you.
Nice to see you, Liz.
This is probably the worst thing that you have ever dealt with in the history of the county.
Well, there's no question it's the worst natural disaster in the history of Ulster County, and that is obviously going a long way back.
Right.
In this situation, what we're talking about is, in many parts of my county, total devastation. In the western part of my county, and truly understand Ulster County is to understand that it is the geographic size of Rhode Island.
Yeah, it's large.
Yes, and so we have very mountainous areas, and we have areas of flat land and wonderful agriculture. We produce some of the best produce in the entire country there. Wonderful corn, wonderful apples, and tourism really flocks to Ulster County. Again, it's a $500 million portion of our economy. So there's an enormous amount going on in Ulster County.
Okay, I happen to be from Ulster County, so this is a very personal experience for me.
Absolutely.
I actually was down in New Paltz a couple of days ago, and I was shocked. I mean, just today, what we know as the Flats, which is right outside of New Paltz, is open. It was completely flooded, couldn't get to the mountain. I mean, what does this mean for you? You've got roads that will be impassable for the foreseeable future.
To understand what we're talking about is to understand what the storm was like. My emergency management personnel had me out throughout the entire storm and all around our county. I've done a flyover 2 days ago to really survey the damage. We're talking about houses torn from their foundations, spun 180 degrees, moved 100 yards downriver. We're talking about situations where we saw people literally had to be saved with our sheriff's deputies doing and their dive team doing just really incredible acts of heroism to be able to save people's lives. We've been fortunate. There have been absolutely no fatalities at this point, but without question, there are roads and bridges that are going to be impassable or broken for a long period of time. You
have a couple of bridges that you are responsible for yourself. Then there are bridges that the state has. I mean, there are layers upon layers upon layers
state,
of damage
town, county, without question, an enormous amount of infrastructure damage has been done. I was talking to someone the other day, and what I explained to them was 6 of our bridges have been compromised that we're aware of at this point. We haven't been able to get to all of them. 3 of them, without question, have to be replaced. There's a town bridge that we literally can't find at this point. That's how far. It's been washed away, and we believe it's in the Ashokan Reservoir. So that's the level of devastation.
Now you bring up an interesting point. The Ashokan Reservoir actually belongs to New York City.
Correct.
And this is an issue that I spoke with Assemblyman Pete Lopez about the other day. He's in Schoharie, another hard-hit area. They were very concerned about the failure of the Gilboa Dam, also part of the New York City watershed and water system. You've been fighting with them for a while about things that people fight about, the impact of the reservoir and the watershed on the surrounding residents vis-a-vis the need for New York City to have water, essentially. Going forward, are you satisfied? First of all, are you satisfied in this instance with what New York City and the Bloomberg administration has done during the storm?
Well, if you're talking about the immediate issue of being able to offer up some assistance with equipment and manpower to take care of the immediate assistance, then the answer is yes. But if you're talking about the long-term relationship that exists with New York City's DEP and Ulster County, it is strained at best.
Well, didn't you sue them?
I did.
Yeah, I'd call that straight. Right.
So, and to be quite frank with you, it was too bad that it had to come to that. But we're in a situation where we cannot allow the citizens of Ulster County, nor will I allow the citizens of Ulster County, to be negatively impacted. We understand the value of providing water to 9 million people and the critical nature of that. But that said, we cannot act as an occupied country and have New York City literally run over top of the residents of my community.
Well, the issue there was the release of water,
correct,
if I'm remembering correctly.
There was a significant high level of turbidity, very muddy, really what qualifies as polluted water being dumped upon the people of my community, so that New York City could have clear drinking water. Now, I understand that clear drinking water is important to the people of New York City, but that same tributary feeds into the Hudson River, where many of the water from my communities is being drawn from. I always say that the health and safety of a child in my community is no less important than the health and safety of a child in Manhattan.
You know, when they prepared, saw a lot of talk from Mayor Bloomberg about we are going to evacuate people, which they did, 250,000
Sure.
people from the low-lying areas. They evacuated nursing homes and hospitals, and they set up shelters. You didn't hear him talk about the safety of the upstate water system that is really their responsibility. I mean, going forward, is there some way to hold New York City accountable for whatever occurs up here?
Clearly, I believe there should be a transformation in that relationship. It has to take place. There's a balancing that exists between providing that water and the community. But what happens now is there's no development allowed, and again, it's not even a local decision. There's no development allowed because it is within the watershed criteria.
Right.
We're very concerned with the push that's happened on tax surcharges, which basically means not paying their fair share to these local communities as well, which really comes to the heart of where we are at, which is when you have disasters like this, having small communities not have the ability to be able to absorb some of the costs that are going to happen to them.
Right, and so it's probably not likely that New York City is going to call you up, that Mayor Bloomberg will call you and say, hey, county executive, I'd really like to cut you a check, which he personally could do, but he cut you a check and help you out with all this storm damage that you've got going on. New York City was not part of the FEMA Federal Declaration of Emergency Disaster. You were,
yes.
Ulster County was. The price tag is going to be quite high.
There's no question. Ulster County itself, in this preliminary evaluations, has over $10 million in just infrastructure damage for the county itself.
Not personal property.
It doesn't
right.
count personal property. It doesn't count towns. It doesn't count villages. It doesn't count any of those other impacts. We expect this to be the most costly incident in the history of Ulster County. That said, the FEMA money that comes to this, the federal dollars that come, that amounts for 75%. Then from that, the balance of that is broken up. 12% is state and 12% is paid for by local governments.
Well, can you afford it?
Absolutely not. In this scenario, because the size and scope of this issue, plus 2% tax caps that are in place,
interesting.
Many of these small communities simply do not have the ability to absorb this. So what we are calling upon the state government to do is to pay for and absorb that 12.5% local match, and to call the legislature into session, if required, to take care of any necessary steps to take care of the assistance for the local communities.
Okay, what about the idea of a temporary suspension of the tax cap? Has anybody floated that yet?
Well, again, that doesn't address the core issue. Large tax increases for people, that right now they can't bear them before Hurricane Irene.
Right.
They're not going to be better fit to bear them after Hurricane Irene. So it's not the suspension of the tax cap that we are advocating for. We are simply saying that the state needs to understand these are extraordinary circumstances. They need to step in and make a difference.
Okay, but the state doesn't have any money either. I mean, the state was already looking at a $3 billion deficit. Right now, I know what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say.
But simply shifting the burden to local governments is not the answer.
I understand. It's a very negative trickle-down theory, if you will. However, the money has to come from somewhere. I mean, first of all, you're going to have to go through your county, right, and say, this bridge is important, this bridge people can live without, this bridge is important.
I mean, Liz, we should be clear about this. I'm one of the most fiscally responsible people you're ever going to run into.
Okay.
I don't raise taxes. I didn't raise taxes this past year. We've streamlined government. We're doing all the necessary steps at local government to be responsible.
But what will you do if the state says, you know what, we can only afford to pay X? And FEMA, mind you, only has $800 million in its coffers right now, and in D.C. they're fighting over it. You see Eric Cantor say, if there's additional disaster, we have to cut it from somewhere else.
We should be clear about this. Anybody who is playing partisan politics right now with people's lives is absolutely the most disgraceful lack of public servant I have ever seen in my entire life. Really, if we're talking about individuals who simply don't grasp the importance and the gravity of this situation and use this for their own political benefit, is to me someone that is just unfit for public service.
Well, and also, I mean, the first responsibility of government is to keep people safe.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay.
And so that's what we're talking about at this moment. It's disgraceful to have that kind of conversation right now from anybody who literally puts people's lives secondary to their own political nonsense that's going on. We saw during the debt ceiling argument in Washington.
The same argument. Yep.
We saw the dysfunction going on in Washington, and what we really saw was the American people really starting to churn because they were looking at this and they were seeing their government not functioning the way it's supposed to.
We're saying a natural disaster is going to become a political football into 2012. I mean, this will become an election issue.
Again, it's something that has to come to an end. All of our federal officials should be completely aligned on this issue. This is about taking care of people. Absolute life and death issue for many people. Housing for people who have no homes. That's what we're talking about here. Building roads for people to get out where they can't get out. Making sure we shore up things like dams so they don't collapse and kill people. When that